Hello, and welcome to episode 57 of the PowerScore LSAT podcast. This is John Denning down in Los Angeles.
And this is Dave Kaloran in Napa Valley.
How you doing, man?
I'm warm today. The heat is spiking.
Yeah, we've had some weird weather down here, too. It was 91 yesterday, and I think by like Thursday, Friday, depending on what happens, I think it's supposed to get back down to a high of like 75.
You're having the same weather we are.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
It's been 70s, then 95 or 100, and then back down to the 70s. It's been quite strange, which mirrors everything in recent months. I mean, since probably the beginning, 2020 is like clearly the calendar of craziness.
Yeah, even the weather's playing 2020 games. But since you are stuck inside with the heat for, among other things, as I am, what do you got in your hand? What are you drinking?
I have an excellent drink that I'm very excited about. I'm a mojito fan in general. I've had those before on the show. This time I gave it a little bit of a summer twist, and as we'll see, there's a reason for that. This is a strawberry lemon mojito.
Interesting.
It's quite tasty. I recommend it to everybody.
That actually sounds like something I would drink. Most of your drinks I'd pass on. I don't know if I have more than
They're
one.
They're outstandingly good.
Yeah.
What are you drinking
flavor
there?
palette. Well, the theme that you went with the strawberry lemon applied to me as well. And again, we'll explain what this means in a bit. I was walking around the neighborhood after they lifted curfews the other day and noticed a bunch of lemon trees planted at various spots. And I didn't go on anybody's property for this, but there were a few that were planted in medians, and I just happened to snag a couple lemons for myself.
So you're a lemon thief.
I'm a lemon thief. If anybody knows that reference, you're depraved. Good for you. But since I had some fresh lemons, it felt like I was bringing the outdoors in, and I had some vodka, I decided to just make essentially what was a vodka lemonade.
It's kind of close to a lemon drop, isn't it?
A little bit. I didn't have any. What's in that? Triple sec too, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Some simple sugar, simple syrup. I don't have any of those things, but I did have vodka, and I did have some lemons. Why the emphasis on lemons, I should ask?
That's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
I think first off, we should mention what we are talking about, which I think for most people is maybe a little bit out of the blue. We are back to talking about the LSAT, and we are talking specifically about LSAC licensing. And I think most people would think this has nothing to do with me. Yeah, there's some fees that get paid. No, it actually has quite a bit to do with you. And if you intend to continue preparing for the LSAT through July and the later part of this year, you actually need to know this because it is going to affect every preparation option that you have out there.
As we will explain,
Yeah, and I think at first some people would say to themselves, oh man, this is a big change. It's going to be messy for a while. It's as if life has given you lemons. But our approach to this is to look at it as really what it is, I think, ultimately a long-term positive. And so we're going to make lemonade out of it.
There you go.
And all of our drinks have lemon in them.
Yeah, and for anyone tempted to tune out because we have announced that this is just going to be a licensing discussion, our unofficial working title for this episode is something along the lines of who gives an F about, that's as much as I can say, about LSAC licensing, and the answer is you really should. So this is going to have a lot more applicability to how you prep and what you're about to see and your wallet, frankly, than most people would anticipate. So stick around. We'll be sure to keep this relevant.
I'll make it worth your while for sure, and it'll explain to you some of the changes you're about to see throughout LSAT preparation, some of which have already started, and many of which will continue. And I think it'll give everybody a much greater understanding and context for the kinds of things that we're going to see coming up.
Absolutely.
But of course, there's still one thing left to determine here, and that is the music of the day.
Yeah, not an artist I'm super familiar with, but I do very much appreciate her vibe, kind of her ethos, and it's Lizzo. I think most people are familiar with Lizzo. I'm a little bit...
Everybody is.
Yeah, a little bit off that. But specifically the song, Here's More Lemon, Juice, which I think is one of her bigger hits.
I think that is the mega hit.
Yeah.
That was the song that really kind of broke her in my on my radar here. It was actually a friend of mine whose wife is really into Lizzo and has been for quite some time, and kept saying, you need to listen to Lizzo. And I was like, well, I like pop music. So I checked it out and I was like, wow, this is super upbeat and a lot of fun. And then later on, I heard from the same wife that she was mad that she'd gotten so popular because concert tickets had just gone through the roof for her. It was like previously she was able to, more or less go see her when it wasn't that expensive. Now it's like multi-hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, in fact, I had a girlfriend from the East Coast who was here towards the end of last year. And we looked up tickets because Lizzo was playing somewhere that night, the Forum or something. And they were like $450 for the cheapest seats. It blew my mind. And I'd never even heard of her at that point.
Yeah, you're not a pop music guy. So.
No, I kind of live under a rock when it comes to this stuff, admittedly. But she's obviously, she's a big deal. And like I said, I am a fan, both of her and this song. Something upbeat, which I certainly need right now.
It's upbeat, but also it goes with the idea of lemons into lemonade juice. Sure. I think thematically we are on point right now.
Cohesive. Let's talk a little bit then at the matter at hand. Let's talk about the LSAT world. Just roll out a few of the housekeeping updates that we've seen.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on. Mm-hmm. You want to start this off?
Well, yeah, the first thing, a little bit in the rear view now, but I'll still mention it, is that the May Flex scores, the very first ever Flex test results, came out this past Friday. I think it was the 5th of June. They all came out, I loved this, they all came out at exactly the same time, 9 a.m. Eastern. I didn't love it for my West Coast friends, because it meant they either woke up super early or woke up to the results, and that was the first thing they saw. But I didn't love it for West Coast us because you and I were both up pretty early to try to deal with people first thing.
I was up at 4:30 tweeting.
Yeah, I might have been up at 4:30 too, but
I don't believe it.
Because I was just getting to bed.
I knew it was going to be something like that.
Yeah, my schedule's normalized under quarantine a little bit. But that's a rough way to start the day on the West Coast. Or a great way to start the day like a kid at Christmas if you got the number you wanted. But I like that they've standardized it.
Me too. And it just as a comparison, it used to be that they would roll out over hours. And so the majority of people wouldn't get their score in the first 30 or 60 minutes. It would take hour after hour. And usually somewhere between 12 and 24 hours later, all the scores would be out.
Right.
And they adjusted their system earlier this year and announced that, hey, we're going to send them all close to simultaneously. So I would imagine within just a very few minutes, everything went out. And I have to say that for me, it was one of the more enjoyable score release days, in part because there was a lot of trepidation beforehand. People were scared. They didn't know what was really going to happen with the scaling. Mm-hmm. And of course, they didn't release the scaling, but the results by and large were really positive. I had a number of students who scored in the 170s, certainly far more than just like the typical 1% that you'd see nationally. And so it was actually a lot of fun to kind of talk to students, many of whom were elated, several who had done better than they'd previously scored on any test.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that too.
Yeah, so that was actually really gratifying to kind of work through. And, I wasn't really sure what we were going to see. Was it going to be crazy scaling and drive everybody down? But it didn't seem like that happened.
No, not at all. You and I heard this a lot, the suspicion that maybe the comfort of taking it home, the 3 sections versus 5 was going to lead to much higher performances, which would lead to a much tighter scale. Maybe I can only miss 4 to get a 170, but it doesn't seem that was the case at all.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that everybody all of a sudden magically scored better. There were a number of problems with the administration of this test where students were affected by proctoring, where they were delayed anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours or what have you. And I saw some consequences of that. And of course, that's something that we're hoping that LSAC is going to clean up going forward, because it's nice to talk about 98.5% of the students were able to complete the test. But if you completed the test after waiting 3 hours for proctor to kind of show up and fix your issue, I don't consider that a success. Yeah. And I don't think they do either. So hopefully that's something that they fix moving forward here. But overall, the results were, I thought, better than expected from this kind of administration, especially given all the uncertainty around it.
Yeah. I think the worst thing I can say about it is I felt relief, which is a good thing. The best thing I can say about it is it did seem like a very fair test, which is exactly what you and I had predicted beforehand. So,
and now we've got another LSAT-Flex coming up, the June LSAT-Flex, which is on the 14th and 15th. And then scores will be out pretty quick on Tuesday, June 30th. So one score release in the rearview mirror, and now another flex coming right down the pipeline at us.
Yeah, 2 score releases in the same month. I've never seen that before.
It's a good point now, isn't it? You think about all the firsts that we're dealing with just in the LSAT land, let alone the world, and it's kind of amazing. But it's you turn around now and there's a test and there's a release, and it is just a constant churning wheel that's going through.
Absolutely, yeah, a grinding wheel, as it were. But at least we know a little bit about what to expect from these next few tests. We know the dates, we know scheduling time. We've given some best advice on how to, deal with that, deal with the proctors. Things seem to be getting better. And we now know July as well is a flex test. That's on July 12th and 13th. And again, a pretty quick turnaround on score release, which is Thursday, July 30th. So at least we get most of July off for new scores.
Yeah, and to add on top of that, the June international LSATs, which I think were originally the 27th and the 28th,
that's correct, yeah.
They were moved to those July LSAT-Flex dates as well. And 2 points that I want to make about this. First off, none of these flex tests count against your yearly test-taking limits. I think they're going to change that if they have to continue to flex them out, but at least the ones that they've scheduled so far, they're all good. So in a sense, it's a free pass to be able to do that. The second thing is if you're coming up on one of these flex tests, go back and listen to the podcast that we did several weeks back about what we learned from the first administration of the LSAT Flex. It will mentally prepare you for what can happen. In many instances, it will work great and the flex is fantastic. Every once in a while, there are problems. You want to be aware of those problems and what you can do to hopefully head them off before they crop up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. In fact, we did a whole series of podcasts on the flex test, including a question that I've gotten at least 3 times this morning, interestingly enough, which is, well, how do I prep for it? And I'm not going to go into that now, but we have covered that idea. What do you do when logical reasoning is only a third of your score as opposed to half of it? How do you restructure and reprioritize? Go listen to some of those episodes. It'll tell you what to do.
I'm actually going to answer a question that I've gotten 5 times in the last 24 hours.
God.
Will Control F work on the LSAT Flex?
I've seen your responses.
Over and over. I have spoken to LSAC administration about this. Control F is a browser-based function. It is allowed. So it's not as if ProctorU is going to come in and stop you. LSAC allows it. It's part of your browser, not part of the testing system they download to you. So if you want to use Control F and that's your call, you're good to go.
If you don't know what Control F is, it has nothing to do with the title of this podcast. It instead is a feature that will find certain words. It's a word search, basically, that you can apply to the screen.
People are talking about it.
Yeah, people are talking a lot about it. I can't think of too many practical uses for it, if I'm honest.
Reading Comp is the place where they want to use it if they're like, I'm looking for a particular word.
Yeah.
So again, I can't see myself using it, but that doesn't mean that I'm casting aspersions on anyone who might want to use it. And I think for a lot of people, it's like a backup.
Yeah.
It's a contingency plan. If they're like, I can't find this, and then they can do a quick search and find it. I'm like, go ahead and have that. That's fine. So
there you go.
That probably brings us to the next flex test, which is perhaps August. What do you think?
Well, the next LSAT at the moment is August. As scheduled.
You're deferring already on this.
Yes, we kind of roll our way through the calendar. But they haven't made any announcements on August yet. I mean, I feel I think I know just based on the current climate of things with COVID, school announcements about closing campuses, other things that are clearly taking a priority to people getting out into big groups. So, big groups for testing anyway.
Hey, let me just cut you off. Let me put you on the point of a sword. August, flex or not? Just answer the question.
Yes.
Cut to the chase. I completely agree, by the way. I also believe that August will be a flex test. I don't know whether or not they'll start counting this against your regular takes or not. But what was it, Harvard that came out just a couple days ago? Harvard Law School said we're not going to have classes on campus. And if Harvard, which is such a thought leader for other schools that are looking to make decisions, if they come out and say that, that's starting to give you the idea that there may be some other schools that do it, and there may be a lot of hybrid classes where it's partially online, partially in person with like reduced class size. You start doing this, it's really hard to imagine putting thousands of LSAT takers into various rooms across the country.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the chances have got to be growing every day that this is a flex test. I don't think LSAC wants that.
No.
And really, realistically, none of us do. It'd be nice to be able to get things back to normal in terms of, the virus situation. But I feel like they're going to be forced into this once again.
Yeah. I also don't think they're going to make an announcement for at least several weeks. I imagine we'll be sometime into July before they say something. Into July, not end of July.
Yeah, I don't think June is going to see us get an announcement on that.
Mm-hmm.
If it was June, it would be the end of June at the earliest.
Yeah, that's fair.
I still think July is most likely.
For anybody who maybe wants to wait and see how August shakes out, you've got until the 15th of July, which is actually after the July Flex test, which is good, to register for it. So you can sit tight if you're trying to figure out Flex or in person, what your preference is.
Which is pretty cool because that's actually a complete timeline of what has been happening from May possibly through August here. Recap for everybody in about 10 minutes. There was one other thing that popped out in the news. I mean, there's actually been a lot of things.
Yeah.
Lori Loughlin going to jail.
Good.
This was LSAT related, though. We're in the LSAT world, not the real world right now. And that was that LSAC has announced that prices will be held the same for the next year. And I have generally positive feelings about that. They raise prices and have raised prices very frequently. So I feel like a price raise at this time would have been inappropriate. So on that account, I applaud them. I also think that perhaps this would have been a great time for a price cut. And I can imagine that if I was sitting in a room with them, they'd all be looking at me like, this is totally unfair for you to make that claim. We've had to rebuild an entirely new online test, and we've had to, take on all this proctoring and all these expenses. Granted, I actually grant all those points. However, let me also say that these are extraordinary times. And just as we did with our stuck at home sale, which we've just extended indefinitely right now and cut prices, 10, 20, 30%, depending upon the product, I think everybody should try to do that. Everybody should try to help out. And I would love to see them do something like that or provide a rebate of sorts to just acknowledge that lots of people have lost their jobs. Situation is unstable in so many respects. Holding prices steady is nice. It's not enough.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd like to think they're at least getting a little more generous with things like fee waivers or, free repeats and things. But the $200 sticker is still a tough pill to swallow.
And look, they've gone out of their way in some instances. I've seen them send tablets to students who didn't have the hardware to take the LSAT-Flex. Like, they have gone beyond what I expected, and I give them 100% props for that. I've seen them, set people up in testing facilities where they're the only person in a hotel, for example. That's not what we're seeing from other organizations. If any of you ever follow the College Board, who oversees the SAT, it has been a disaster show over there. And the SAT and the integrity of it as an entire institution is under serious attack right now, with good cause, because they are run by somebody who, in my personal opinion, David Coleman, doesn't care at all about students and is interested in only money. And I don't think that's the case with LSAC at all. I get a very different vibe from speaking with them. But still, just because things could be worse doesn't mean that we can't always work to try to make them better.
Well said. I think we can end it on that note and move into the real heart of the matter today.
I always like to end on a David Coleman bash for those who know who he is. One of my least favorite people in all of educational testing.
For good measure, too. For good reason.
Yeah. Let's talk about, and it's exciting, man. It's like a disco ball is spinning. Let's talk about LSAC licensing.
I like it.
It's manufactured excitement.
That's right. Yeah. It's not going to feel that artificial as we get into it. I promise it's going to take a turn for the genuine.
It's 100% genuine. And in some respects, this truly is exciting for me, which shows you how crazily into the LSAT I am. This is stuff that we have known about for over a year. We knew these changes were coming. We've been preparing for them on all sorts of different levels. And certainly things are different than we expected right now because of the COVID-19 situation. But we knew that the entire landscape of LSAT preparation and how students went about getting ready for this test was about to change. And we are just about there. We're on the doorstep at this point. And I've already started to see the changes in a number of instances. And we know that what is about to happen is you're entering a period at the end of June at the latest where the current situation with licensing is going to end. We're then going to be in a transitional period where we move to a new licensing system. And then roughly by the end of the year, that transitional period where you have a little bit of the old and a little bit of the new will pass away and you will enter the new licensing 100%. So it's going to be messy for a while, and then all of a sudden it's going to be completely different. So let's give a little history of
I think that's a good idea.
Where things were, where things are going to be, and where things will end up. You want to start? You want me to start?
I can get into it a little bit. I mean, the test in terms of my understanding of its history, and you've been doing this longer than I have, so you may have to clarify some of the 90s or even 80s behavior.
I was in college.
You know what I mean.
Continue.
I was in a crib. So the way it's played out recently in terms of licensing is that it's been a pay-per usage per question thing. Different questions, depending on their age, cost different things for companies to distribute to students. But that's how LSAC has always essentially come about and collected their fees. You give them a report of what questions you gave out, what students used, and you do the multiples.
Yeah, so if you printed a book that had a recent question in it, you paid like 5 or 6 cents for that question. And then every time you printed a copy, let's say you printed 100 copies, you paid 100 times whatever the particular fee was for that one question. And that was the case for every single question. And this was a big deal because, and I'm going to go actually back a little bit further, John.
Okay.
As you kind of referenced, it used to be a long time ago that there was no licensing of LSAT questions. And then there was a guy at LSAC, a guy named Jim Vasilik, who is a super nice guy, one of my favorite people, who unfortunately passed away several years ago. He kind of created the licensing program, and he built it around this idea of pay for what you use. Mm-hmm. You use 10 questions, you pay for those for each student. You use 100 questions, you pay for those for each student. And this transformed the entire industry because a lot of companies at that time, Kaplan, Princeton, were using questions that they had made themselves. And I've said on multiple occasions that questions that you make on your own just don't go through the same rigorous testing, and that if you can use real questions, you should. Why didn't people? Because it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
It added up quickly when you started looking at fees. And so we had this for years and years, and LSAC administration has changed over time. And for a long time, it was very stodgy. Things just stayed the same way they were. There wasn't a whole lot of communication. And when Kelly Testy came in, she started making changes. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, the number of changes that she's made and a lot of the positive things that I think she has enacted so far. Well, one of the things they went in to overhaul was the licensing. And they didn't do anything at first, but last year they started holding meetings very consistently, trying to get feedback. What should we do? How should we change it? So up until now, pay per usage per question.
Yeah. And again, I like that system. It seems endlessly fair because you're not going to underpay them and they're not going to overcharge you. As long as you track this stuff, you know exactly what it is that you're giving out, what students are getting, and what it's going to cost. So it was, I thought, a fair system, whether a book or a course or anything else. Those meetings that you're talking about, Dave, we're, I suppose, fortunate to have been privy to many of them, to be participants in many of them with various people. And so we've seen the winds of change prior to most people noticing. To me, the first big step is something called PrepPlus. And interestingly, I don't know that all the people listening to this will be aware of it yet.
And let's just preface this, that this transition is moving from pay per question usage, which allowed people to choose how many questions they wanted to use and really had an impact on how much was presented, to more of a single payer fee-based system. And then PrepPlus was the first sign of this. So what was PrepPlus?
Yeah. When you talk about single payer, PrepPlus is essentially an option for students, or at least optional for now, where they pay $99 for what is a subscription. It comes with 60 plus tests on LSAC's own Law Hub interface. You pay $99 for years access to those tests. So 600 to 700 questions, depending on how many they ultimately choose to offer. We've talked about this before. And I think you and I have both been of the opinion for a while now that this is a really good deal. It's a bargain of sorts for students. To get that many questions ultimately cheaply is pretty great. But that's what PrepPlus allows you to do.
Yeah, PrepPlus is a great deal. For a $99 fee, which seems high, all of a sudden you're getting over 60 tests. Compare that to what the prior fees were, where prep tests that were sold by LSAC were typically $6 each.
Yeah,
really
at
$8.
Least, right?
Yeah, and the recent ones were $8. Companies that use the super prep exam pay $10 in licensing for that. So you're looking at some fairly substantial fees for a single test.
Right.
And now you're able to get 60 exams for $99. But when we talked about this a couple months ago,
$1.50
we
a
said,
test.
yeah, this is one of the best deals that's ever happened in LSAT preparation, because for that single fee, you now have the ability to take more than enough tests to properly prepare for the exam.
Yeah, I'd say that this is plenty. But it's bundled. So if you only need 5 tests, you're still paying the $99. We'll talk more about what that's going to mean for people as it plays out into courses and various things. But that is what PrepPlus is, and it was a landmark moment in terms of how it is that they're distributing questions, what they're asking of companies and students for access to those questions.
And interestingly enough, did it take hold the way I thought that it would?
Not in the least. No.
It didn't. And I think now, this just goes to show that you can do this for a long time and still not be, not think of every angle here. I had said to LSAC, I said, I think this is going to be a huge success. And I'm guaranteeing that in the long run, it will be. But 2 factors kind of worked against it early on, maybe 3 factors. The first one was that when it came out, a lot of people were already moving towards the end of their preparation cycle. So they didn't want 60 tests. They didn't need to spend the $99 because they're like, look, I'm only taking one more LSAT. I'm only going to take like the March LSAT. Then, of course, we had the COVID situation, which I think also changed the dynamic. But ultimately, the thing that maybe had the biggest impact was you are in a transition, so all the other options are still available. For example, if you want to go take a flex test, you can go to the PowerScore website and take a flex test right now from us and buy just a single exam for $7.50. You don't have to pay $99. So if you've been preparing for the last year and now you have a flex test and you're like, I just want to take a couple exams to get with it, I'm not going to pay $99. I'll just pay like $15 and take 2 tests and be good to go and at least be up to speed on it. It's a cost-benefit kind of analysis that people make. So because all these other options exist, and I'm not talking about just PowerScore, I'm talking about just about every other company as well, there is no pressure.
Yeah. There's been the freedom of choice up till now.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people, especially given the timeline of things, are going to choose the cheaper option or choose the thing that is most applicable to their situation. Be like, I've done 40 of those tests already. I don't need another 20. But I would like 3 flex tests. And there's your cheaper choice. So,
well, they also might have paper copies of all this because all those are still floating around out there. So someone's like, I'm not going to pay the $99. And there's been zero pressure to kind of make that transition.
Or they're enrolled in, say, one of our courses where we provide a lot of these tests as part of the enrollment fee. That gives them a ton of access to things. Why am I going to double down for $99?
So what's about to happen then? Yeah. I think the key thing is what's going to happen now.
Yeah, we're right on the precipice of a few of those choices disappearing, frankly.
Yeah, so let me explain what will happen here at the end of the month. And you're starting to see it now. I'm starting to see our fellow companies that do this begin to switch over, and we're about to switch over as well. The licenses that we all operate under, which is what gives us the authority to use real LSAT questions in our classes, in our books, what have you, and is something that I consider to be awesome. I mean, I'm very grateful for the fact that we can use real questions. Those licenses are expiring by the end of June 2020. And so every company has to transition to a new license on or before the end of June. So I could do it tomorrow if I wanted to. You know, I know some companies did it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I could wait until the end of June. When that happens, a sea change will begin to occur. Now, it goes in two phases. If you've purchased a course from us or, you know, anything, you're exactly the same as you were before. You're going to be grandfathered in. So that's the good news. If you bought a course, say 2 weeks ago, or you enrolled in tutoring 2 months ago, nothing's going to change for you. You've already locked into what's happening. But for those people who start enrolling in courses after the license changes, you're going to be looking at an entirely different world, and that world is going to require, not recommend, but require that you have the PrepPlus $99 subscription. It's part of the rule that says if we want to show you questions on screen in a digital format, you have to be a PrepPlus student. This is mandated to us by LSAC, and it's mandated to every single company. So up until now, there's been no pressure because there's been these alternatives. It means that the alternatives are going to disappear, though.
That's right.
And it's only going to be the PrepPlus environment and the grandfathered-in students, and then the grandfathered-in students will eventually lapse. And so the future is going to be PrepPlus, and that's it. So let's talk a little bit more, because that's a grandiose description.
I feel like there should have been an organ, like, boom.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. So that is the change that's happening as we record this, really. But by the end of the month, that is the deadline, where if you want to see even one question presented to you digitally, you have to spend the $99.
Yeah. Now, let's first off talk about books. Are books being changed? Largely not.
The licensing for books.
The licensing for books is largely not being changed. It really kind of like shakes out to be exactly the same. It's still a pay for the questions that you use. And that wasn't something they originally had in the license. But then when we talked to them, I was like, we have some books that are, you know, kind of popular. They're like, oh, yeah, we should probably keep that the way that it is. So all the books that you see out there won't change. But if somebody has a course where they are presenting content to you on screen, or there's a module or a video, every one of those companies is going to be affected or is already being affected by it. Because LSAC has said, if you're going to present content digitally, you have to be inside our system and you have to have the $99 fee. They're going to check it and make sure that you have it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of interesting because as students enter the kind of like the new era, most of them are going to end up getting the $99 PrepPlus anyway. And that's going to be a useful thing because it won't matter which company you work with. You could work with us, you could work with somebody else, you can work with both of us simultaneously, and you still will only have paid the $99 fee. It's one time for you over the course of a year.
Yeah, and it transfers, like you say, from place to place. Once you have that confirmed in your own LSAC account, then companies just have to check your account and make sure, and by check your account, there's a cross-referencing system that LSAC set up. They're not going to log in as you, don't worry.
Yeah. Now, the reason they do that is because of the approach that they're using where you pay the $99 in some form or another, and then they charge us to actually present questions to you. So if we work with you, we have to pay an additional fee. If another company works with you, they're going to have to pay that same fee. So the companies are going to bear kind of like a different fee structure with no limitation. Fortunately, students are $99 and done.
Yeah.
So this is why you're going to start seeing course options where you're going to be asked, do you have a PrepPlus number? And if you don't, someone's going to either charge you $99 more, or maybe it's built in and they charge you $99 less. It depends on how each company does it. But they're going to require at some point that you have that number to be able to gain internal access to all the additions and the online supplements and support that is offered to students.
Yeah. Now, let me just readdress something you said, because I feel like people might not have caught the full gist of it. I've heard it for the 50th time, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it to some degree, which is that you pay $99 as a student for access to this content. It's yours. You own it for a year. And then we have to pay more money to show that content to you and discuss it. Not even discuss it, just to show it, period.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if you decided that you wanted to work with two companies simultaneously,
We all have to pay that fee.
Yeah, would pay the full separate fee. It's just the way they've set it up. I think it's ingenious in some respects. I don't love it because I'd like to. I mean, if the student already paid for the content, why is there an additional fee? But I mean, that's a whole other debate that none of us are going to win in terms of going through this. It also means, like, I'll give you an example. Let's say you bought the LSAT Logic Games Bible, and I wanted to put up a bunch of videos that explained the course of what we talk about in there, as well as the questions. And that is something actually we're working on. Mm-hmm. Well, it requires the $99 fee. And we have to pay an additional fee on top of that, which is actually more than we make off the book itself. So the funny thing here is you've bought the book. You should be able to get free supplementary information on it without an additional charge. Nope, because it's digital. This is the rule. It also means that courses that are relatively inexpensive run into a problem. Like, it's hard to have a course that might be a $99 course because already you're doubling your fee to the student because they're going to have the $99 subscription. You're already paying an additional fee to LSAC. So for me, I've always thought this cuts very harshly against relatively inexpensive options.
Yeah, we should run through some of these effects, how this is going to reshape the industry. That's a big one. These cheap courses out there, if they use any digital content, are not cheap anymore, or at least substantially inflated.
I'll give you an example. We run advanced courses that address logic games and logical reasoning. They're $350. Well, right now...
accelerated, right?
What's that?
Accelerated?
I'm referring specifically to the advanced courses right now. Gotcha. So something that is directly related to kind of like students who are trying to score in the upper 160s and 170s. These are very specific courses on LR and LG. They're $350. And once we switch over the license, if we kept everything the same, what's that?
No, you're good. I'm agreeing with you.
It would be a situation where you just add $99 onto it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure there'll be some adjustments that'll be made where we're like, all right, I don't want to have to shift that. But once you've bought that course, you can go take another course and you won't ever have to pay that fee again. So you're going to have to incur it at some point along the way. And by the way, once we get to a point of after, say, like December or January, there won't be any individual options. Everyone will have to have this as well. So that's the first effect, is that you're going to see additional fees that are floating around out there that are added on to each course cost that you run into.
Yeah, that's not the only effect, though.
Let's go through it.
It's going to have a massive impact on your ability to buy individual digital tests because of the fees companies like us have to pay for you to have that digital test. And it's way more than the price we could actually charge for tests themselves.
No, you'd have to be selling these gigantic bundles. And at that point, if you're going to sell a huge bundle, why not just make sure that they have the $99 fee?
Yeah.
So let's make sure that's clear. If you come in after July 1st and after the licenses have switched over, you're not going to have the option to buy an LSAT-Flex test. At least not from PowerScore. The 750 test that we sell right now, it won't make any sense financially to be able to do it, because you'd sell it for $750 and you'd require each student to have a $99 package that included a whole bunch of different tests. It's like, that doesn't make any sense, and no student would want to go buy that.
Right.
So that type of thing is going to disappear. However, let's say you bought a Flex test yesterday. If you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, you're going to take my Flex test away. No, we're not. You're grandfathered in. We wouldn't do that to you, number one. You're going to be just fine. You'll be grandfathered in, and those Flex tests will remain accessible to you. That's part of the agreement that we made with LSAC over this. It's the new people, the people who haven't made prior purchases, who will see that some products just disappear. We'll still keep all of your LSAT Flex tests that you've purchased available to you, but you won't be able to buy new ones.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important point, because it means that sometime in the next, 7 to 14 days at the most, our ability to sell Flex tests to new students and to add Flex tests to someone's account, it's going to disappear.
Yeah. So if you want some individually, You can keep them, but you've got to get them before we have to make this switch. We'll also still include them in the online student centers for our courses, as you would expect.
Yeah, if you've already
enrolled in a
purchased
class
these
or
kinds of
something.
things,
Right.
we're not taking content away that people have already purchased. We're just being limited in what we can give to people in the future, and that I wish that wasn't the case, but this is just the world that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
So
again, another one of those cheaper options that just gets obliterated based on this.
Yeah. Another thing that you'll see change is the way in which free content is given to students. Currently, you have a situation where we can pay as we go. If we want to have 20 students in a room and we want to talk about linear games, we can go choose the linear games that we want. We can then pay per student for those, usages. And a lot of companies will go do this because, they want to show people this is how we do it. It's a pretty normal marketing technique. Can't do that anymore.
Yeah, this one's particularly near and dear to my heart, and it's breaking because the free webinars,
no
man, I
online
love those.
Scenario that you can do this in.
I know.
It's being taken away from you.
Yeah, so for me to go teach, say, a webinar or a clinic for free and have hundreds of people show up, they have to all have paid the $99 to have this, and then we're paying per student just to have them there.
Now, there is a backdoor on this. There is a marketing package that you can purchase from a licensing standpoint. And this has been a point of a lot of discussion in terms of trying to figure this out. And I'll just kind of expand on this point. One of the things is if we want to go in and teach something, we like to pick and choose what we find the most interesting, like really interesting LR questions. And you don't want to choose all the same ones. We've been around for a long time and our material is pretty popular. So I noticed that a lot of other companies choose similar questions to the ones we use, but we change ours with some frequency. Well, the marketing package that they're offering has a really limited selection of questions, and it essentially forces all companies to use the same basic question set. So I can already tell from having talked to some of my colleagues that they're like, why should I pay for this when everyone's going to have the same questions?
Yeah, and it's not cheap. We don't need to talk actual numbers, but it's very expensive.
It's thousands.
Yeah, and think about it. If you want to do a linear games webinar, something we run frequently, we change it up, it's very popular. There might be one linear game within that set of questions that they've given you, and then every company who wants to talk linear games does the exact same one.
It's not very attractive.
Or advanced linear games. We've done one on circular games. I bet there's not a circular game in there. So it just kills all of that based on the limitations of what the marketing packages even include.
Yeah, so you're going to see limits occurring on the free content that companies can offer, which I hate. I wish there was a way around this, but I know that LSAC is still feeling their way through this. Things may change in a year or two. It may change even from them listening to this and realizing that this is a legitimate negative for the kid out there who's not sure if they want to go to law school and hasn't really looked at an LSAT and doesn't want to spend $100 to get a digital package, and they're just trying to see whether or not law school would be for them. They're the ones that are getting hurt right now with this, and that's unfortunate. So I hope it changes in the future, but you can kind of see some of the effects here. Individual tests that are presented digitally, gone. Free seminars and free presentation of online digital explanations, mostly gone. Inexpensive courses, gone. We run an accelerated course that's really popular, and this is putting pressure on that in terms of what it costs. And so I don't know what happens with some of these things in the future. Again, I'll just reiterate, if you've already signed up for something, it's not going anywhere. You're completely 100% fine, and if there's nothing to worry about as far as that.
Yeah, July 1st is kind of D-Day with a lot of this. You miss that cutoff, and there is no turning back.
Yeah, if you haven't started preparing by July 1st, you're going to discover that your options disappear and that every option is going to require that you have the $99 program.
Yeah.
So,
again, which is a great deal, but not ideal for everyone.
No, especially someone who's on a short-term preparation or realizes they have to retake an LSAT and, they don't have enough material, they're the ones that are going to get pushed around by this a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at a lot of students who are going to probably take Flex in July, probably August. And if you're preparing for the August test, you need 70 digital exams to get there that aren't in the Flex format? No.
But if you if August goes Flex and it's your first test and you want to take a Flex exam, the ability for you to buy a one-off Flex test is not going to exist at that point. You're going to have to be like, all right, I have the $99 program. Then I can get access to things like that.
Again, unless you buy it before the end of the month. So
also true.
There is a bit of urgency to this if your, let's call it runway, is a bit shorter than the end of the year or so.
You know, it's a weird conversation to have. We very rarely talk about like the inside mechanics of things like licensing, but that's normally because it doesn't have any effect on people. Here, it has a huge effect, and we're right at the cusp of it, which is why we've chosen to talk about it now so people understand what's happening. And later on, I know a bunch of people are going to say, I can't believe you did that. And I'm going to have to be like, it wasn't me.
You didn't have a choice.
I would not have made this change. I am responding to really rules being handed down on high, like Moses handing off tablets.
You missed the lemons that life gives you. But yes, Moses and the tablets.
So,
there is some lemonade in the future, though. This isn't all sour. There's some positives to this, aside from the beneficial deal of getting this many tests for a fair price.
Yeah, it's definitely an excellent deal in and of itself. If I was starting off right now preparing for the LSAT, I'd be like, I'll get that $99 thing and it's going to take me through however long I need to study. I'm going to be good.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any downside for that.
I mean, there's other things.
Yeah, it also allows us, once you do have the $99 fee, to give you any question that we want at any point. And that's a lot greater flexibility than used to exist. And so I welcome that. I think that's going to create some really positive changes in things being presented and how we talk about some of the concepts that are out there. So it's kind of an interesting point because you're going to see this, if you haven't already, where somebody's is selling a course and they're saying, do you have PrepPlus? And if you don't, they're going to start telling you have to have it. Either you have to go to LSAC now, or we will help you purchase it, or whatever may be the case. They're going to require that you either have an existing account or that you create an account right then and get it. So be aware of why that's happening. The new licenses also have a secondary effect, which is that the interfaces that everybody's using for digital testing will change. And what LSAC's done is, I think quite kindly, is they said, look, we realize this is a big transition. You can use the same Law Hub type of interface. It's pretty similar. It's not identical, but it is very similar. It's got very similar looks and feels to it. However, the new licenses don't allow for that exact identicality. And so we've had to hammer out agreements with them that say, we're going to make a few changes to it so that it is demonstrably different, and it is. And I've already seen interfaces that other companies have put out there, and they're pretty close, but they are different. Ours will change as well. Yeah. So when the license gets signed by us and we switch over, our digital interface for the LSAT-Flex for every test that we have will change just slightly. We'll tell people when that's happening. We'll put them a big notice, probably, and link to this podcast and say, like, let's explain what's happening. This is not our choice. This is beyond our control. It's being forced upon us.
Yeah.
But that's, we accept that and we move forward with it.
What do you do? What it means for you as a student is that as you jump from company to company, test to test in various places, from LSACs to ours to hopefully that's the only two, it means that the interface that you're going to see won't be nearly as identical as it has been. Functionally, on the whole, you'll find it workable, to be sure, but we've been forced to separate ourselves further.
Yeah, for those of you who want to explore it further, you can get an opportunity to see what everything looks like when they start coming out, but they're close enough that it's not going to be off-putting. It's similar enough that you'll understand what it is you're looking at. And it's kind of like the same thing like getting into different cars. They all do the same thing. You have to maybe adjust to where the knob is here or where the stick shift is there, but it's still fundamentally doing the same thing for you, which is allowing you to take a test online digitally.
Yeah, we haven't had to switch what the pedals do, but we might have had to move the pedals a little bit apart or reshape them. The right one's still the gas.
Put it in the back seat.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be hilarious. Anyway, the one thing I will note is that if you are a fee waiver student, Fee waiver students will get PrepPlus with their program. Fees won't be waived for prep companies. That's already part of the deal. So we always pay, but that's always been the case. So I'm not too chafed about that. But just be aware that if you get a fee waiver, you don't have to get that PrepPlus. You don't have to pay that $99. It's part of the program.
Yeah. And like we mentioned before, in talking about some of these fees, I think that they're becoming more generous with who qualifies, especially, I hope, these days, as a lot of people's financial situations have taken a turn very rapidly and unexpectedly.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah.
So let's just give a quick recap. I realize we already just gave a long recap, and I can imagine the look on your face is like, no,
it's a lot to digest.
It's a huge amount, and it's hard for me even to explain. I know it is for you too.
Sure.
So right now, you don't have a huge number of people using PrepPlus. There are certainly some. It has its limits, but the usage of that is going to explode relatively soon. And if you haven't made a purchase of some type of LSAT preparation, course or what have you, tutoring, you name it, you're going to end up having to purchase it at some point. If you're in that original group, you're going to be grandfathered in. Nothing will change for you. All right. You're going to be the same today as you will be in July, as you will be in September. So you won't have to worry about anything like that. Once the year ends, a lot of those grandfathered students will be gone. The new licenses will be in a position where every student will be entering, and then pretty much everybody is going to use the PrepPlus at that point, and it's going to be critical. If you want to see content presented on a screen, PrepPlus is required. That is the future that you are looking at. So sooner or later, if you continue to prepare for the LSAT, or if you're just starting up, you're going to need this.
I think that's a solid recap.
I did my best.
No, it was perfect. Perfect timing, too. I just finished this lemonade, so.
I took a really big drink of that mojito in the middle and almost coughed. But it was so tasty, I was like, I might have to have another after this.
There you go. Well, I've still got a couple fresh lemons upstairs. I may get a refill as well. But yeah, I know this is a lot of information. We'll try to give very detailed timing notes too, because people are going to click, depending on their situations, to talking points that we hit here. Wait, what does this mean? If I want a flex test, what are the dates? When do I sign up? What does that course include? There's just a lot to consider for us and for you guys, but I hope this at least was helpful in making some of those choices and preparing you, frankly, for what the landscape looks like just a month from now.
Well, if you didn't know this was coming, you'd be confused. And you'd be like, well, why can't I do this? I could buy this test 3 days ago, and now I can't purchase this test? What happened? This is what's happened. So, as always, I encourage people who have questions to come interact with us on our forum, ask us questions publicly on Twitter. We're happy to answer that and kind of like have these discussions where we explain these points. I know both John and I probably won't take too many DMs on this, because we'll end up answering the same question like 500 times.
Wait, can you use Control F? I don't know. I don't know if anyone's asked you yet.
Don't ask me about Control F ever again. So if you do have a question like, well, what happens with this? Ask it to us publicly, because that way everyone else who's reading can get the benefit of it. And I think, as everybody knows, John and I love to give out free help, and we're happy to talk about what we perceive as the truth of all this. And so there seems to be a general lack of that oftentimes in terms of what's being talked about, or at least misinformation. And we can at least say, this is what we think, this is why we think it, and explain it. And hopefully everybody can at least learn a little bit more and get better at preparing for this test. Any final thoughts, John?
Nope. This has just made me thirsty is all. But I'm glad we took the time to do this, despite the fact that's a little more technical sometimes than what we normally get into.
Super technical. If you're really into intellectual property law, this is great. And I am. So I've actually enjoyed the entire process. It's certainly the process of seeing the policies being shaped and having input on them to some extent. I'm not going to say a great extent, because some of the things that I wanted didn't actually happen. But we were able to get certain things that I think were really beneficial for students too. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a transitional period here for the next 6 months, and then really the new world will be here.
Is that a Titanic reference?
the former world has passed away.
Yeah.
It's my favorite scene in that movie, by the way, is that the body's floating in the atrium, and then they have that voiceover.
Well, this won't see
badass.
any kind of carnage like that, I'm happy to say.
Yeah, let's not have a Titanic.
No, this is not the
It's
Titanic.
Titanic imagery, but I'm not asking for the Titanic at all. I hope this is straight sailing. No icebergs. All right. If you get a chance, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else you may find it in the world. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and if so, please leave us a comment or a rating. And if you have any questions, please send those to lsatpodcast@powerscore.com. On behalf of John and myself, we hope that you are safe and happy. Have a great week, and we will talk to you soon.